Well.
Hey, what's happening?
It is happening. We're so glad to be here with you again on this day. I think it's June 16th,
It is.
2025. And I'm Reverend Dr. Marion Staples,
And I'm Jennifer Staples.
and we are representatives of Racing Cultures, Bridging the Divide. We are actually in affiliation with Race Investors Corporation. We're glad to be with you again today to hopefully just have a nice discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, the name of this episode is it Monday already? Today is Monday, June 16th. We always, in life want to get through the weekend and get past so many different things. And Monday is always the time when we try to come to terms with back at work.
I was back at work.
You're back
Actually,
at
I
work.
think I worked all weekend.
And I was working too, and I went to the pool.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
in an area where we have sunshine every day, and we're just so glad to be here again with you on this Monday. Is it Monday already? As I was telling my wife earlier, what came to my mind from my thespian background, I was in a performance that was written by Stutz Terkel. It was called Working. And then that show, it was actually um, a show that was also on Broadway, and we performed it. Uh, and it had different characters. I played a character. I was Mike Lefevre. I was a steel worker. Then I also played one of the truckers, with truckers. And then I played an offshore seaman that would go out, and I had these different characters. It was a musical, so we had a lot of nice songs, and we really enjoyed that. It was written by the music score was written by Dennis Schwartz, who wrote the musical score for Hair.
Mhm.
So every time we would sing, is called a crescendo. Uh, every song seemed like it was almost the end of the song, but the vocals kept elevating. So we had one song that was 34 measures.
Wow.
One song we had to hold out for 34 measures. That's a long time. So we had to all stay in shape.
Yeah.
Is it Monday already? Which leads me to I don't know how you feel about it. This has been an interesting weekend that we just come through.
It's been a crazy weekend.
More than crazy. Some of you are aware that we had some events taking place across 50 states. No kings. That was a big thing that happened over the weekend.
Yeah. Wonderful protests. They were all peaceful, thankfully. And but we also had something else going on in DC.
Yeah. Well, what happened in DC?
Oh, wasn't it the parade
Yes.
for to what, celebrate the 250th year of the Army,
United States Army.
right?
Well, some other
But it
things.
was also supposed to be celebration of somebody's birthday. So
Somebody's birthday.
Mhm.
Well, we try to have a very candid platform here. We try to not get into a lot of things, but we're dealing with race and cultures. Um, I think the last episode we kind of alluded to some of the things that brought us to this point of wanting to discuss race and cultures. Obviously, I come from well, not so obvious. Depends if I could have been adopted, but I come from a different culture. My wife comes from different cultures, but our cultures have reached a point where we have bridged those divides, uh, going on mm, two score, well, one score and two, one score and 2 years going on that we've been knowing one another and been together. Of course, we're married. Um, culture and race. I'll get, as we move along through our discussions, we'll allude to race. Remember, I don't care what anyone says, race is a social construct.
Right.
Um, you can look at a person and try to describe a race to them uh, based upon physical characteristics. And the term race was actually applied to people in this country to kind of rationalize and support a notion of why we should have slavery. Now we have a situation in this country where we're dealing with, we talk about the protests. That has a lot to do with what is race. We have
Right.
people that have been identified as looking a certain way, and so therefore we need to deport them. More specifically, brown folks.
Mhm.
Some people that are Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Ecuadorian, El Salvadorian, whatever the case might be, what brings those people together is their cultural language, which the dialects often change. But we have an administration that if you look a certain way, well, regardless if you are law abiding or whatever, we're going to go after you. It was interesting that we were told that people that have committed crimes, people that were, uh, drug users, people that were unsavory, those would be the people that would be deported.
And I'm all for that. Honestly, if you committed a crime and you are in this wonderful country called the United States, w you know what? If you're not here and you didn't go through the proper channels, and then you're committing some really horrible crimes, you should be deported. In fact, if you're not here legally, everybody needs to have that channel to become here legally. And
Mm.
it needs the system is broken, to be honest. I mean, it is just so difficult to gain citizenship, and you have to it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of money, and I mean, it's very heartbreaking what people have to do to become citizens of this country.
Yes.
And, you know, if you're here and you're not legal and you're committing those horrible crimes, you should be deported. However, what's happening is people are being deported that aren't committing those crimes just because of the way they look. And they might even be citizens, but they don't have the proof of it on them. So they're being detained until they can prove it.
Well, that's the case. Well, detained and how they're detained is another
Mhm.
story. They also are being abused.
Exactly.
But getting back to legality, I do know that if you go to another country, um, let's use her for example. I alluded to the WNBA last time we met. Brittany Griner, of course, was playing in Russia because we get into equity issues of women athletes not receiving equitable pay. When the United States Olympic soccer team went through that whole thing about being paid and treated equitably as the men players were, but Brittany Griner and a lot of other WNBA players had to go overseas or whatever to make compensatory monies to balance out, to be like the NBA players. Well, but Brittany Griner was there, and all of a sudden she is stopped for allegedly having some marijuana, a little
Mhm.
trace of marijuana.
Mhm.
Or she served all those months in that Russian prison. She used to have a lot of dreads when she got back, those dreads were gone. So, we do say that people have to obey laws. I'm all
Right.
for that. Like I totally agree with you. If you are committing crimes, well, you could be president.
There's that.
Oh boy. We have so many, it's such an injustice. such an injustice.
Yeah.
How we say that these people that are criminals that are being picked up for committing the crimes, when we do have someone sitting in the highest office of the land that is a convicted felon, having committed 34 felonies.
Mhm. Yeah.
We believe in bringing truth to power here.
Well,
Um,
I just think that our country right now needs to come together. We need to agree on some things. And one of the things we need to agree upon is human decency. I mean, we need to treat everyone as though they are human because why? We are human.
okay,
And instead of treating each other, I mean, we can have differences and that's fine. But when it turns to violence, when it turns to belittling, that's not okay.
and we saw that over the weekend again. Oh, is it Monday already? A lot of us needed this Monday because
Yeah.
what we experienced, not only did we have the No Kings protests, which are very important. The Constitution, we'll get into that. How did the Constitution really apply to everybody? Well, it left out some people that were not really totally included in the Constitution. Women, people that were descendants of slaves, people of the First Nations, be it Cherokee, Apache, Iroquois, they were not totally included in the Constitution. However, we do have a Constitution. There are still things that need to be happening. As we often say, um, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men slash women are created equal. They're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. However, it didn't fit. And in order to form a more perfect union for peace and tranquility, so we have these two documents that's supposed to be bringing people together, and then we have the 13th, 14th, the 15th Amendments supposed to cross those areas where people were excluded, and
Mhm.
that gets into the whole DEI aspect. So people need to understand those amendments also correlate with the DEI principles.
Mhm.
And the people that really benefit from DEI were not, well, people of color. I'm just going to say it like it is. The majority of people that benefited from DEI were white females, starting businesses, getting those contracts, and so on and so forth. But here we are, the reason that we are here where we are is because of these conflicts of terms, of policies, of DEI back in the 60s.
But wasn't
It,
that really called affirmative
affirmative,
action instead of DEI?
you read my mind.
Yeah.
We used to have affirmative action, then
Well, yeah, but DEI and affirmative action, I think, are 2 separate
the
things.
two separate things. However, there's so many similarities.
Right.
Uh, we found that there were still some inequities going on, so
Yeah.
DEI policies were brought forth. So here we are on Monday, going through protests, going through parades, and
Yeah.
then unfortunate killing of representatives in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think Governor Walz of Minnesota said it very, very well that violence and killing people is no way to solve differences or to
Mhm.
work through problems. Um, it's a shame.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, we need to reach across the aisle or reach out to your neighbor, you
yeah,
know, talk to somebody who maybe has different views than you do and just learn and grow from one another.
most people don't even know their neighbors
Yeah,
anymore.
true.
We have reached a point in this country
Mhm.
that we have those that are still being oppressed, those that are being mistreated. I want to read something by Paulo Freire. He is an educator, and this is very important because it made me think about what's happening to people. Paulo Freire, he's an educator like I've been all my life. He says, sooner or later, being less human leads the oppressed to struggle against those who made them so. Let me say that again. Sooner or later, being less human leads the oppressed to struggle against those who made them so. Think about that statement. Then he says, in order for this struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, which is a way to create it. Let me say this. In order for this struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, which is the way to create it. So basically, when you have been oppressed, you're looked as less than human. Your humanity, and I think Jennifer, you mentioned earlier about being human.
Mhm.
Humanity is stripped away when you're being oppressed.
Right.
Um, and it says, I'm going to read that again. In order for this struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, which is a way to create it, become in turn oppressors of the oppressed,
Mm.
but not become in turn oppressors of the oppressed, but rather, this is resolution here, but rather restorers of the humanity of both.
All right.
So the oppressed has a big job. How can a person that's oppressed try to restore their own humanity and the humanity of their oppressor? That's where we are right now. We are in a situation where our culture, when we talk about sports, I remember when Caitlin Clark went to the Indiana Fever, um, the term always was, we're going to create a different culture. So everything is a microcosm.
Mhm.
Athletics is a microcosm of the greater society. So when you have issues happening in sports, or when you have things happening in any kind of competition, you can look into the greater society and see some of those same things. It's a microcosm of what's happening in the greater society. So the oppression is here. We are in a different but the same time in 2025 as it has been in the beginning. This is a time to call to task what those our founding fathers put down on paper. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that America has written a check to all of us
Mhm.
and has come back insufficient funds.
Mhm.
The check was written to give us all, we hold these truths to be self evident that all men and women are created equal, endowed by the Creator. But isn't that something? That Creator happens to be God. Now, don't get it twisted. This country was not founded on Christianity. And that's another area that's been brought into this mix. We have Christian nationalism. People have twisted the whole concept of Christianity and turned it into a political weapon and fodder to justify certain behaviors.
But hasn't that been the story for many years? Isn't Didn't the white man use the Bible to enslave the black man, and they used the Bible as their principle and stating that it's in the Bible?
Yeah, some of you, may not know, but that's what I taught for decades. I taught classes on race and ethnic relations,
Mhm.
and I taught classes that dealt with multiculturalism. And one of the things that talked to my students about, and I was saying, they were talking about slavery. I said, well, think about this phrase, for they came with the Bible and the plow.
Mhm.
So we have, and some of you may not be aware of this, but there's two Bibles. One, the canonized version of the Bible, the King James Bible, and then we also have what is called the slave Bible. So the slave Bible, and I always get the chapters mixed up. There's about 1,890 some chapters in the Bible, canonized Bible. And the slave Bible has like 290 chapters. The slave Bible that was given for them to read, it left out any sense of freedom, the book
Mhm.
of Exodus, any sense of hope, the book of Psalms, and also Philemon. Philippians, it talks about Philemon and Onesimus, that um, the slave and master situation, because there was a reconciliation between
Right.
the two. Um, that relationship was different. It was more like employer and employee.
Right.
So um, that's what's happened. People have twisted concept of Christianity into something else. We are really at a crossroads, so to speak.
So where do we go from here? What do we do? What do we do differently in our own lives that can make a difference? And, we just had a whole weekend. On Saturday, we had the protests, and I, you know, get off the couch and go protest peacefully. I mean,
Yes.
that's something you can do. You can also call your state representatives. You can vote. That's your voice in this country, is voting. We have midterm elections coming up. Let's vote those people out of office that are just allowing this craziness.
We have allowed the handmaid's tale to come
Oh
home.
boy, have we ever.
Yeah. Yes,
If you've
that,
not watched that series, it's something to behold.
but it's actually The Handmaid's Tale is a blueprint of Project 2025.
Absolutely.
And before The Handmaid's Tale, there was another order. It was called The Order. It was a group of white
Mhm.
supremacists that were going to take over the 5 northwestern states here in this country to make it only for white supremacists. And I just want people to understand that we are at a time now where we have to bridge the divide. We have to come together. So what do we do? I mentioned earlier about neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, how many people go across the street, go down the street or across the road and see someone that may not look like them and actually talk to them? Today, it was so interesting. My wife and I, we have an incredible friendship, and we have an incredible ministry. But most of all, we have actually always come to terms with the divisions of culture. We understand it, but we have so much in common.
Mhm.
And I've often said, we're actually much more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
Everyone's always trying to find something that's different. Well, when you look at a person's physical characteristics, well, a man, there's a woman. Well, man and woman, they are a little different, male and female. And you look at a person that has different melanin in their system. I was at the pool today, honey, and uh, this little girl was swimming away, and her mother came to get her, and we struck up this conversation. Um, and the mother was saying, "Well, she's a little bit more pale." And the mother, I said, yeah, the mother had all this melanin in her system. And so if people were to see that, people want to categorize that mother as being different, but that's their daughter.
Mhm.
Their skin tone was totally different.
Right.
And so we had this incredible discussion, and her husband, um, he wasn't there, but we were talking about her husband and how he said to her, we need to stay where we are because we need to try to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. People have to say that they are willing to do what it takes to make a difference.
Yeah.
So that's part of where we can begin.
Yeah.
On this episode, we can't just solve everything right away,
Mhm.
but we can at least start the dialogue. So that's what we're doing today on this Monday,
Yeah,
trying to
and you know
start the
what?
dialogue.
We welcome your comments.
Welcome your comments, and we
And or your questions.
in questions. And it put it this way, we don't have all the answers, but I
Mhm.
do think by having experience and by having our willingness to open up our hearts that we can do a lot of good things to help one another. So I think this episode is just where it is.
Peace out.
Peace out. Thanks for joining us today or this evening, wherever you are. And we look forward on our next episode. Again, we are Race and Cultures Bridging the Divides, and we are part of Race and Ethics Corporation. Thank you very much for joining us. Everyone have a great Tuesday.
Ah, it's coming up.
Yes, it is.
All right. Good night.